Joining me now, Spencer Kuvin, attorney for 9 of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And Spencer, thanks for being with us. Maxwell's prison, of course. Maxwell's prison move comes just a week after she met with DOJ officials. A senior administration official called any of the allegations of preferential treatment, quote, absurd. As a lawyer, what do you make of how survivors that you've represented in the past may view this development?
Well, let's get one thing straight. Ghislaine Maxwell is a convicted sexual predator. She is a serial liar and a sexual predator. So any preferential treatment is seen as a slap in the face to victims. Having said that, I have interviewed numerous sex traffickers behind bars, and they are not required to speak with anyone. They're not required to speak with DOJ. They're not required to speak with attorneys. They can refuse interviews. So my guess is that likely what occurred was this deal to transfer her was negotiated before the interview ever took place. In other words, she said, I don't want to talk to anybody. And they said, well, if we give you a transfer to a nicer facility, will you speak to us? And that was likely the deal that was struck even before the interview took place.
How do you think the victims are reacting to the DOJ meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell, Congress trying to speak to her as well? There's been questions about whether that's prudent and whether it legitimizes her in some way, shape, or form.
Well, it's just sad. I mean, it's sad that unfortunately you've got this woman, Ghislaine Maxwell, who wants to lie and cover up and not talk about what happened, to the extent that they're having to go through all of these hoops to try and figure out the truth. But the reality is all we need are the files that are contained at the DOJ, the videotapes that the DOJ has. Release them. All we need is the president to sign an executive order tomorrow releasing these documents to the general public and all of the videotapes that exist. And that way it's hard evidence that we can look at, that the public can evaluate, not just lies potentially by a sexual predator.
I was just going to ask you, how are these victims coping with the fact that this has now been drudged up in the public square yet again? Is this re-traumatizing them, or are they just looking for answers and seeking additional justice?
It's sad. In contact with a couple of the victims, they do not want this to come up ever again. And, this is a part of their lives that occurred 20 years ago now. 20 years they've been dealing with the pain and the trauma of what happened with Jeffrey Epstein. And they want it to go away. So, listen, whether it was the original Bush government that didn't turn over the materials, or the Obama administration, or the Biden administration, or now the Trump administration, they've been failed by all administrations from the beginning to the present. And they just want to move on with their lives. It's just sad that they have to continue dealing with this because the government won't release the files.
And about the files, I know you said many of your clients want those to be released, but are there any trepidations about what may be disclosed to the public and whether or not this could actually end up harming some of the victims who have already suffered so much?
At the end of the day, redaction is a normal practice within the legal system. All they have to do is go through these files and videotapes and redact or blur out any of the victims from the videos or the documents that exist. That way it protects the identity of the victims, but yet it releases the identities of those people that were potential perpetrators that were involved in these acts. So you can do both. You can release the information while at the same time protecting the victims' rights.
Have you been contacted by the DOJ, or do you know of any of the victims that you represented at the time being contacted by the DOJ to give their assessment on what they want to happen here?
No, at this time, we haven't received any contact by the Department of Justice or any of the Department of Prisons or Corrections about what their thoughts are on this issue. I would point out, though, that, if the president's own attorney is going to be interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell, and then she's going to speak, there's a very low likelihood that people are going to trust what she has to say. Allow someone like myself, one of the victims advocates, to get in and interview Ghislaine Maxwell, put her under oath to where she's got to answer my questions. Then at that point, we might actually get to the truth.
Spencer Kuvin, thank you so much for sharing your insight. And of course, our thoughts are with the victims who are still processing all of this. And that